Wichita spread across the plains of Kansas like a giant chessboard, where every neighborhood had its own history, its own secrets, and its own problems. This city never truly slept. Aircraft factories operated in 3 shifts, bars on Douglas Avenue buzzed until dawn, and police reports were filled with accounts of family dramas unfolding behind the closed doors of ordinary homes. David Foster woke up in his second-floor apartment in an old brick building in the Delano neighborhood at 6:30 in the morning. The sun had not yet warmed the air, but he already felt the weight of the day ahead. 42 years old, divorced for 3 years, owner of Foster Motors, an auto repair shop. His life could be summed up in a few words, and none of them sounded particularly inspiring. The kitchen table was covered with bills and documents. David poured himself a cup of coffee from the old coffee maker that Jessica had taken during the divorce, and then returned with the words, "It doesn't work very well anyway." Like so much else in his life, the coffee maker functioned, but without much enthusiasm. The auto repair shop was located in an industrial area, a 20-minute drive from his home. 3 mechanics, regular customers, a steady but modest income. David had built the business from scratch after losing his job at the Boeing aircraft factory. At the time, it had seemed like a temporary solution, but temporary had stretched into 8 years. "Morning, boss." Carlos, the senior mechanic who had arrived at work before everyone else, greeted him. There was a slight concern in his voice. "We have a problem with the order for parts for the Chevrolet. The supplier is demanding prepayment." David nodded, mentally calculating the balance in his bank account. He had the money, but every expense had to be planned. After the divorce, Jessica had gotten half of their savings, and alimony ate up a significant portion of his monthly income. Not that he was complaining. They didn't have children, and the alimony was temporary, but the financial pressure was constant. "We'll figure it out," he told Carlos. "Call them after lunch and tell them we'll transfer the money tomorrow." 12 miles from the auto repair shop, in a respectable neighborhood on the east side, Sarah Foster was making breakfast for her family. 38 years old, she was the mother of 2 children, 10-year-old Emma and 7-year-old Jake. On the surface, her life looked like the American dream: a house with a lawn, a minivan in the garage, a banker husband, but appearances can be deceiving. "Mom, I have soccer practice today," Emma said, hurriedly swallowing her cereal. "The coach said we need new uniforms." Sarah felt a familiar tightness in her stomach. A new uniform meant extra expenses that the family budget couldn't handle. She smiled at her daughter. "Of course, honey. We'll figure something out." Michael Foster, her husband, sat at the table with a cup of coffee and his smartphone. 40 years old, a middle manager at First National Bank of Wichita. A good man, a caring father, but with one problem that was slowly destroying their family. "Honey, I'm going to have to stay late today," he said without looking up from his phone. "Client meeting." Sarah knew it was a lie. There were no meetings. Michael would spend the evening at an underground poker club on the outskirts of town, trying to win back what he had lost last week. The habit had started 2 years ago, at first as a harmless diversion with his coworkers, but it had gradually become an obsession. The Foster family was in debt. A mortgage, 2 cars on finance, credit cards maxed out. Michael's salary covered the basics, but his gambling losses left holes in the budget that had to be plugged with new loans. "Okay," Sarah replied. "I'll pick up the kids from school." After the family went their separate ways, Sarah was left alone with thoughts that had been troubling her for months. She opened her laptop and went to a dating site, but not just any dating site. The elite escort service, Discreet Encounters, promised good pay for keeping wealthy men company. Sarah had created a profile under the name Victoria 3 months ago, when debt collectors started calling about an overdue credit card payment. The first meeting was a nightmare. She was shaking so badly that the client just talked to her and gave her the money out of pity. But then it got easier. Not easier, but easier. She wasn't a prostitute in the classic sense. Most of her clients just wanted to talk, have dinner at a nice restaurant, feel wanted. Some, of course, wanted more. But Sarah learned to manage the situation while maintaining boundaries. In 3 months, she earned enough to pay off her most urgent debts and cover several months of her mortgage. Michael suspected nothing. He was too preoccupied with his own problems. The phone rang. The number was familiar. The agency. Victoria? We have a client for tomorrow evening. A middle-aged man, first time with us. He wants company for dinner and we'll see how it goes. Are you available? Sarah closed her eyes. Yes, I'm ready. Meanwhile, Detective Thomas Clark sat in his office at the Wichita Police Department, sorting through papers on a domestic violence case. 35 years old, 15 years on the force, he had seen enough family tragedies to know that the worst crimes didn't happen on the streets, but in homes where people should feel safe. Thomas had known the Foster family since childhood. He grew up in the same neighborhood as brothers David and Michael. They played baseball together in high school and dreamed of the future together. Life took them down different paths, but their friendship remained. He last saw David a month ago at Charlie's sports bar. He looked tired and older. The divorce had clearly taken a toll on him. You know, Tom, David said then, sometimes I think my life ended when Jessica left. Not in the sense that I want to die, but in the sense that I don't know how to go on. I'm 42 years old and I feel like I'm starting from scratch. Thomas said something encouraging, but David's words stuck with him. He had seen that look before, in people who had lost hope and were ready to do desperate things. At the Morning Cup on Douglas Avenue, Paris Jones was wiping tables and listening to the customers' conversations. 45 years old, divorced, owner of a small but popular establishment. Paris knew all the town gossip, and many people came to her not only for coffee, but also for news. I heard the Fosters are having problems, said Mary Wilson, a local teacher at the next table. Sarah looks exhausted, and Michael has become kind of nervous. Paris raised an eyebrow. The Fosters lived nearby, and she often saw them in her cafe. Something had definitely changed recently. Sarah only ordered water and sat in the corner, nervously checking her phone. Michael didn't show up at all. A lot of people are having financial problems, Paris replied cautiously. Times are tough. But she knew it wasn't just about money. In her 20 years of working with people, she had learned to read the signs of family crises. The Fosters had all the symptoms of a family on the verge of collapse. That evening, David sat in his apartment in front of the TV, but he wasn't watching the program. His thoughts revolved around the same topics: loneliness, financial problems, uncertainty about the future. Jessica hadn't left because he was a bad husband, but because their relationship had simply run its course. But that didn't make the breakup any less painful. He picked up the phone and dialed Michael's number. Hey bro, how's it going? Fine, Michael replied, although his voice sounded tense. Work, kids, the usual stuff. How about you? Fine too. Listen, maybe we should talk on the phone this weekend? It's been a while. Sure, let's do that. The conversation lasted only a minute, but David felt that a wall had grown between them. They used to be able to talk for hours, but now they could hardly find anything to talk about. Michael lived in a world of family responsibilities and career ambitions, while David lived in a world of loneliness and unfulfilled plans. That night, Sarah lay in bed next to her husband and listened to him breathe. Michael slept restlessly, sometimes muttering something unintelligible. She knew he was dreaming about cards, bets, and losses. Tomorrow, she had a meeting with a new client. She needed the money to pay for Emma's lessons and Jake's school expenses. She justified her actions by saying she was looking out for her children, but she knew that was only part of the truth. The other part was that this double life gave her a sense of control over the situation. The agency told her that the client was nervous because it was his first time. Usually men like that were easier. They were more afraid than she was and rarely asked for anything she wasn't prepared to do. Sarah didn't know that tomorrow her life would change forever. She didn't know that her new client would be the man who would destroy all her plans and lead to a tragedy that no one could have foreseen. Wichita was asleep, but in houses scattered throughout the city, people couldn't find peace. David thought about how to fill the void in his life. Sarah planned how to keep her secret from her family. Michael counted cards in his head, trying to find a winning combination. They were all connected by invisible threads of kinship, friendship, and circumstance. But no one suspected that these threads were about to turn into a noose that would tighten around the neck of one of them. 3 days had passed since the meeting at the hotel, and David couldn't settle down. He canceled 2 appointments with clients at the auto repair shop, citing poor health, and spent most of his time at home. replaying the scene in room 312 in his head. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Sarah's face, first the shock of recognition, then the despair as she explained her situation. He tried to understand what he was feeling: anger, pity, disappointment, or something else. David was sitting in the kitchen with a cup of cold coffee when the phone rang. It was Michael. "Hey, bro." Michael's voice sounded tense. "How's it going?" "Fine, how about you?" "I wanted to ask if you've seen Sarah lately. She's been acting kind of strange." David felt his heart beat faster. "Strange? In what way?" "Nervous. She's always checking her phone and answering in one-word answers. Yesterday I asked her where she was last night and she got angry. She said I didn't trust her. Maybe she's just tired. She has 2 kids and a house to take care of." "Yeah, probably." Michael paused. "Listen, do you want to come over this weekend? It's been a while since we've hung out." David realized he couldn't meet Michael without giving himself away. "I'm busy. Lots of work at the service station." "I understand. Well, let's talk next week." After the conversation, David realized that the situation was becoming unbearable. He couldn't pretend he didn't know anything, but he couldn't tell his brother the truth either. It would destroy his family. At the same time, Sarah tried to act normal, but Michael was right. She was nervous. Meeting David had changed everything. Before, she had been able to separate the 2 parts of her life, her family and her work as an escort. Now those worlds had collided, and she didn't know what to do. She canceled 2 appointments with clients, claiming she was sick. But the money was running out, and the bills weren't going away. Debt collectors called every day demanding payment on overdue loans. "Mom, I have a soccer game tomorrow," Emma said at dinner. "The coach said I need new cleats. The old ones are too small." Sarah looked at her daughter and felt a familiar tightness in her chest. New cleats cost at least $100, which she didn't have. "We'll see, honey," she said. "Maybe we can find something cheaper." "All the girls on the team buy them at the same store," Emma insisted. "I don't want to be different." Michael looked up from his plate. "Sarah, do we have money for cleats?" "I'll figure it out," she replied curtly. "How will you figure it out? Where will you get the money?" "I said I'll figure it out." Michael looked at his wife in surprise. She was usually more accommodating and would explain financial problems. This abruptness was unusual. After dinner, when the children had gone to do their homework, Michael approached Sarah in the kitchen. "What's going on?" he asked. "You're acting strange." "Nothing's going on. I'm just tired of constantly being asked about money." "But we do have money problems. We can't pretend we don't." Sarah turned to him. "What do you suggest? Get a second job? Quit and look for something that pays more? Or maybe you'll stop playing poker?" Michael paled. "I don't play poker." "Don't lie to me, Michael. I know where you spend your evenings. I know why we don't have any money." "It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. You're a gambler, Michael. And until you admit that, our problems won't be solved." Michael wanted to say something, but realized that denying it was useless. Sarah knew the truth, and that changed everything. "I'm in control," he said quietly. "No, you're not. The situation is in control." Sarah went into the bedroom, leaving Michael alone in the kitchen. He sat down at the table and picked up his phone. He had $50 in his poker app. Maybe if he won, he could buy Emma some soccer cleats. Meanwhile, David made a decision. He couldn't tell Michael about Sarah, but he couldn't pretend he didn't know anything either. He decided to talk to Sarah again, to try to find a way out of the situation. The next day, he arrived at Michael's house in the afternoon when the children were at school and Michael was at work. Sarah opened the door in her housecoat, surprise and alarm in her eyes. "David? What are you doing here?" "I need to talk to you." "There's nothing to talk about." "Sarah, please, 5 minutes." She reluctantly let him in. They sat down in the living room, keeping their distance. "I've been thinking about this for 3 days," David began. "I can't pretend nothing happened." "What do you mean?" "I can't keep quiet, it's not right." Sarah stood up. "David, if you tell Michael..." "I'm not going to tell Michael. I want to help you find another solution." "What other solution?" "A job, a normal job. I can give you money to tide you over until you find something suitable." Sarah smiled bitterly. "What kind of job?" "I've been a housewife for 10 years. My education is outdated." The most I can find is a job in a store for $8 an hour. That's better than what you're doing now. $8 an hour? That's $320 a week before taxes. Our mortgage is $1,200 a month. Add utilities, food, childcare. You think $320 a week is going to solve our problems? David realized he hadn't been thinking realistically. Then Michael needs to know the truth about his gambling and about your job. And what good will that do? He'll leave me. He'll take the kids. He'll say I'm a bad mother. Michael isn't like that. You don't know what he's like when his reputation is on the line. He works at a bank, David. If it gets out that his wife is a drug addict, it will ruin his career. David was silent, knowing that Sarah was right. The scandal could indeed ruin Michael's career. Then what do you suggest? He asked. Nothing. Forget it ever happened. Get on with your life. I can't. Why? Because you're family. Because it's wrong. Because sooner or later it'll come out anyway. Sarah sat down across from him. David, I understand that this is hard for you, but think about the children. Emma and Jake aren't responsible for the problems of adults. If everything falls apart, they'll suffer the most. What if it doesn't fall apart? What if you continue this double life? What will happen in a year? In 2 years? I don't know, but right now, it's the only way to keep our family together. David stood up and paced the room. Sarah, this can't go on forever. Sooner or later, Michael will find out. Maybe, but not now. Not from you. What if I happen to see you again? With another client? Sarah blushed. That won't happen. I'll ask the agency to remove you from the list of potential clients. They do that? Yes. Sometimes there are conflicts of interest. David sat back down. Sarah, I want to help, but I don't know how. There's only one way you can help me, by keeping quiet. What if I can't? What if I can't stand it and tell Michael? Sarah looked at him for a long time. Then you'll ruin the lives of 3 innocent people, my children and me. What about Michael? Michael is an adult. He chose his own path. The children didn't. At that moment, Sarah's phone rang. She looked at the screen and turned pale. The agency, she said. I have to take this. Hello? Victoria? We have a regular client who wants to meet you tonight. Good pay, no problems. Are you ready? Sarah looked at David. I need to think about it. 6 o'clock tonight. Call me back. Sarah hung up. They want to meet tonight. Are you going? I don't know. I need money for Emma's boots. Sarah, don't do this. I'll buy the boots. And then what? Jake's school expenses? Utilities? Food? Are you going to pay for everything? David realized he had backed himself into a corner. He couldn't pay for all of his brother's family's expenses, but he couldn't force Sarah to quit escorting. Give me some time, he said. I'll figure something out. There's no time, David. They're expecting an answer by 6. Then tell them you're busy. And what am I supposed to tell Emma? That there's no money for soccer cleats? David stood up and took out his wallet. Here. He placed $200 on the table. For the cleats and anything else you need. Sarah looked at the money but didn't take it. That's not a solution. It's a solution for today. And tomorrow there will be another problem. Tomorrow we'll find another solution. Sarah took the money. Thank you, but that doesn't mean I'm going to stop working. Sarah. David, I'm grateful to you, but I can't depend on your help. It's not fair to you. It's fairer than what you're doing now. For you, maybe. For me, it's not. David realized that the conversation was going nowhere. Sarah was determined to continue escorting, and he couldn't accept that. I'll go, he said, but we'll talk more. David, please, don't do anything rash. I can't promise. After he left, Sarah sat for a long time with the money in her hands. $200 would solve her problem for a week, maybe 2. But then what? She called the agency. This is Victoria. I won't be able to make it tonight. That's too bad. The client will be disappointed. Tell him I'm sorry. Okay, but next time give me a heads up. Sarah hung up and felt a strange emptiness. She had turned down money her family needed because of her conversation with David, but it was only a temporary refusal. Sooner or later, she would go back to work. That evening, Michael came home earlier than usual. He looked depressed. "How's it going?" Sarah asked. "Bad. I lost the last of my money." "What last money?" "The money on the emergency card." Sarah felt the ground slip away from under her feet. "How much?" $300. "Michael, that was money for the utilities." "I know. I thought I'd win." "You always think you'll win." Michael sat down at the table and covered his face with his hands. "I can't stop, Sarah. I'm trying, but I can't." It was the first honest admission in months. Sarah walked over to him and put her hand on his shoulder. "Michael, we need help. Professional help." "I know. But what will we tell work? What will people think?" "Who cares what people think? This is our family." "Treatment costs money." "We'll find the money." "Where?" Sarah didn't answer. She knew where to find the money, but she couldn't tell her husband. "By the way," Michael said, "David called. He wants to meet up this weekend." "Why?" "I don't know. He said he wanted to talk." Sarah felt uneasy. What to talk about? He didn't say, but he sounded strange. Strange? Tense, like something was bothering him. Sarah realized that David wasn't going to just forget about what had happened. Sooner or later he would talk to Michael, and then everything would fall apart. "Michael, what if we leave?" "Where?" "To another city. Start over." "Sarah, I have a job. The kids are in school. We can't just up and leave." "We can if we want to." "Where did that come from?" "What's going on?" Sarah realized she had said too much. "Nothing. I just feel like a change might be good sometimes." "I feel that way too, but running away isn't the answer. Sometimes running away is the only answer." Michael looked at his wife in surprise. "Sarah, you're scaring me. What's going on?" "Nothing happened. I'm just tired of all these problems. We'll get through this. I'll go to rehab, quit gambling. I'll find a second job." "Okay," Sarah said, but deep down she knew it was too late. David wouldn't leave her alone, and sooner or later the truth would come out. Friday evening brought a new wave of crisis. Michael had lost another $400 playing online poker, using a credit card that was already maxed out. When he came home, Sarah knew immediately from the look on his face that something was wrong. "How much this time?" she asked, without looking up from washing the dishes. "Sarah, How much, Michael?" $400. "But I almost won. Just a little more and..." The plate slipped out of Sarah's hands and shattered on the floor. $400? Where? "Credit card. But I'll pay it back, I promise." "Which credit card?" "They're all maxed out." "I got a new one. They offered a corporate program at work." Sarah turned to her husband. There was such fury in her eyes that Michael involuntarily stepped back. "You got a new credit card? Without my knowledge?" "Sarah, we needed the money." "We needed the money, and you gambled it away." The shouting attracted the children's attention. Emma peeked out of her room. "Mom, Dad, what's going on?" "Nothing, honey," Sarah said, trying to control her voice. "Go back to your homework." Emma reluctantly left, but Sarah knew the children could hear everything. These arguments were becoming more frequent, and the children couldn't help but notice. "Michael, we have to do something. Now." "I know. I'll go to rehab." "When? Tomorrow? Next week? Or when we lose the house?" After that conversation, Sarah realized that time was running out. The agency had offered her a meeting with a regular client, $1,000 for one evening, enough to solve their most pressing problems. On Saturday morning, David woke up with a firm decision. He couldn't keep quiet any longer. His meeting with Sarah had shown him that the situation had gone too far. Michael had to know the truth about his wife and how serious their financial problems were. He called his brother around noon. "Michael, we need to talk." "Sure. Want to come over tonight?" "No, not with the kids. Come to my place. 7 o'clock? "Okay. Is something wrong?" "We'll talk when I get there." David hung up and felt a heaviness in his chest. He knew he was going to ruin his brother's life, but he saw no alternative. The truth was painful, but the lie was destructive. Sarah was preparing for a meeting with a client when Michael told her he was going to see David. "Why?" she asked, trying to sound indifferent. "He wants to talk about something. He sounded serious." Sarah felt a chill in her stomach. What could he want to talk about? I don't know. Maybe he'll offer to help with money. Sarah realized that David was going to tell Michael everything. She had to stop him. Michael, what if we postpone the meeting with David? Let's spend the evening at home, as a family. Why? You were going to see Lisa. I can reschedule. Sarah, what's wrong? You're acting strange. Nothing's wrong, I just want to stay home. But I already promised David it's not nice to cancel at the last minute. Sarah realized she couldn't talk her husband out of it without arousing suspicion. Fine, I'll go to Lisa's after all. At 6:30, Michael left for his brother's, and Sarah canceled her meeting with her client and followed him. She couldn't let David destroy her family. David lived 20 minutes away. Sarah parked around the corner and saw Michael arrive 10 minutes later. She waited another half hour, then went up to the apartment and listened at the door. I can't keep quiet anymore, David said. Michael, you have serious problems. I know I have problems. I know I gamble too much. That's not all. What else? Sarah held her breath. David was about to tell him. Michael, this is about Sarah. Sarah? What about her? She's working as an escort. There was silence. Sarah could only hear her own heart beating. What did you say? Michael's voice was quiet, dangerous. I ran into her by accident. I booked her through an agency. I didn't know it was her. You're lying. I'm not lying. Michael, I'm sorry, but you have to know. Sarah couldn't listen anymore. She quietly entered the apartment. The door was unlocked. It's true, she said, appearing in the living room doorway. Both men turned around. Michael was as pale as a sheet. David looked relieved. Sarah, Michael whispered, what are you doing here? I was trying to stop him. I was trying to ask him not to tell you. So it's true? You really... Yes. Sarah lifted her chin. I've been working as an escort for 3 months. Michael sat down on the sofa as if his legs had given way. Why? Because we need money. Because you gamble away everything you earn. But this is Sarah. How could you? How could I? How could you gamble away money for utilities, for food, for the kids? That's not the same thing. You're right. It's not the same thing. I earn money and you lose it. Michael stood up. You think that justifies what you're doing? I think we all do what we can. David tried to intervene. Listen, maybe we should calm down. Shut up, Michael shouted. This is all your fault. My fault? Michael, I just told the truth. The truth? You destroyed my family. You and Sarah destroyed your family. I just opened your eyes. Michael lunged at his brother, but Sarah stepped between them. Stop! The children are home alone. The children! Michael grabbed his head. God, what are we going to tell them? Nothing, Sarah replied. The children are not to blame. Are we to blame? I'm to blame for my wife. Don't you dare, Sarah interrupted him. Don't you dare blame me. Who else can I blame? Yourself, for making me do it. No one made you. You did. Every dollar you lost made me do it. David tried to intervene again. Maybe you should stop. David, this is none of your business, Sarah said. You've done enough. I was trying to help. Help? Sarah turned to him. You destroyed my family. Sarah, I couldn't lie to my brother anymore. And I can't lie to my husband anymore. But I do it because I have children. Michael headed for the door. I'm leaving. Where? Sarah asked. To a lawyer. To file for divorce. Michael, no, please. After what you did. Sarah, I can't even look at you. Can you look at yourself? At the man who ruined his children's future? If you leave now, don't come back, Sarah added. Fine, I won't come back. Michael, wait, David said. Don't make decisions in anger. When should I make them? Michael, if you leave, I'll tell your boss everything, Sarah said. I'll tell him you've been playing with the company credit card. Michael stopped. What did you say? You think I don't know? The new credit card you got is a corporate card, and you're gambling with that money. You wouldn't dare. Try me. David watched the scene with horror. Listen, you're both saying things you'll regret. Shut up, David, Sarah and Michael shouted simultaneously. This is all your fault, Sarah continued, turning to David. If you had kept your mouth shut, we would have worked it out. If I had kept my mouth shut, you would have continued to lie to your husband, and everyone would have been happy. No one was happy, Sarah. It was better than what we have now, maybe. but it would have been more honest. I don't care about your honesty, I care about my children. Sarah moved closer to David. You ruined my life, my children's lives. I was trying to help. No one asked you to. Sarah, I couldn't keep quiet. You could have, but you decided to play the hero. Sarah looked around and saw a bread knife on the kitchen table. David had been preparing dinner before his brother arrived. You know what, David? She said, slowly approaching the table. You're right. Honesty is the most important thing. Sarah, what are you doing? Michael asked, noticing her movement. She grabbed the knife and turned sharply toward David. Being honest, she replied, and plunged the blade into his chest. David looked at her in surprise, then at the knife handle. He tried to say something, but blood came out of his mouth. He fell to his knees, then onto his side, and didn't move. Michael stood paralyzed, unable to believe what was happening. Sarah stood over her brother-in-law's body, trembling all over. There was blood on her hands. My God, Michael whispered. Sarah, what have you done? What I had to do, she replied. I protected my family. You killed my brother. He wanted to destroy our children. Sarah, you're a murderer. Sarah looked at her husband. There was no remorse in her eyes, only cold determination. Yes, she said, and if you tell anyone what happened here, the children will be orphaned. Is that what you want? Michael stood silently, staring at his brother's body. We'll say he was robbed, Sarah continued. You came over and found him dead. I was at Lisa's all evening. I have an alibi. Sarah, we have no choice, Michael. Either we stick together or we lose everything. Michael closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were filled with resolve. What do I need to do? Detective Thomas Clark received a call on Sunday morning at 8:47 a.m. The body had been discovered by a neighbor who had come to borrow money and found the apartment door ajar. David Foster was lying on the living room floor in a pool of blood, a knife sticking out of his chest. Thomas had known David since childhood. They played baseball together and dreamed of the future. Seeing his friend dead was like a punch in the gut. What do we have? He asked Officer Rodriguez, the first officer to arrive at the scene. A man, 42 years old, one stab wound to the chest. Judging by the position of the body, the attack was sudden. The apartment has been ransacked, several boxes have been turned over. Thomas put on gloves and examined the crime scene. Something bothered him, but he couldn't figure out what it was. What's missing? His wallet, apparently, and possibly cash. The neighbors say he kept his money at home. Forced entry? No, either the door was open or he let the killer in himself. Thomas nodded. Who found the body? James Wilson, the neighbor downstairs. He said he came to borrow money for gas. The door was ajar. Thomas wrote the name in his notebook. Family? Brother, Michael Foster. We've already contacted him. Michael arrived half an hour later. He looked shaken, his face gray. When he saw his brother's body, his legs buckled. My God, he whispered. David. Thomas approached him. Michael, I'm so sorry. Tom Clark? Michael recognized the detective. What happened? Who did this? We don't know yet. It looks like a robbery. When was the last time you saw David? Michael paused, gathering his thoughts. Last night. I went to see him. What time? Around 7. I stayed for about an hour. What did you talk about? Work, life, the usual brotherly stuff. Thomas studied Michael's face. Something about his answers seemed rehearsed. How did he look? Was he worried about anything? No, he seemed normal, maybe a little sad, but he's been like that since the divorce. Where were you after 8 o'clock? At home, with my family. Can anyone confirm that? My wife and children. Thomas wrote down the information. Michael, did you know that David kept cash at home? Yes, he didn't trust banks very much. He always kept some money at home. How much, approximately? I don't know exactly. Maybe 1,000, 1,500. Enough to kill someone for. Michael nodded, looking at his brother's body. After the body was taken away, Thomas carefully examined the apartment. The search seemed superficial. A few drawers had been turned over, documents were scattered around, but expensive equipment remained untouched. The TV, laptop, stereo, everything was there. Strange burglar, he muttered. Takes only cash, ignores the electronics. Forensic scientist Jennifer Chan was working on the fingerprints. What do you think, Jen? Lots of Foster's prints. A few strangers, but most are old and smudged. There's one clear set on the door handle. Male, large. His brother was here last night. That explains the prints, and the knife has only the victim's prints on it. Thomas frowned. So the killer was wearing gloves? Or wiped the knife? But that's strange. Why wipe the knife if it was a spontaneous robbery? Thomas wrote down the observation. The case was getting more interesting. That evening, he drove to Michael's house to talk to the family. The house on the east side looked respectable, but Thomas noticed signs of financial problems, an unkempt lawn, peeling paint on the fence. Sarah opened the door. She looked tired but was keeping her emotions in check. Thomas, Michael said you were working on the case. Yes, I need to ask you a few questions. They went into the living room. The children were doing their homework upstairs. Sarah, where were you last night? Thomas began. At a friend's house, Lisa Parker. She's going through a divorce and needed some support. What time did you leave the house? Around 6:30. I got back at about 11. Can Lisa confirm that? Of course. Thomas wrote down Lisa's contact details. And you, Michael, did you go straight home after your meeting with David? Yes, I got home around 8:30. Was Sarah at home? No, she came home later. Thomas nodded. How long have you known that David kept cash at home? Michael and Sarah exchanged glances. A long time, Michael replied. David never trusted banks completely. Who else might have known about this? I don't know. Maybe his colleagues at work? His ex-wife? Thomas stood up. Okay, if you remember anything else, give us a call. He paused at the door. Oh, one more question. Did you know that David used escort services? Sarah paled but quickly regained her composure. What? No, of course not. Just checking all the angles. Sometimes those kinds of connections can lead to problems. David wasn't that kind of person, Michael said. Okay, good night. Thomas left, but the feeling that something was wrong only grew stronger. Sarah's reaction to the question about escort services had been too sharp. The next day, he spoke to Lisa Parker. She confirmed Sarah's alibi, but there was something unnatural about her manner. Yes, Sarah was at my place all evening, from 6:30 until 11. What did you talk about? Life, problems. I'm going through a divorce, you know. Did Sarah go anywhere? Make any calls? No, I mean, maybe to the bathroom, but not for long. Thomas felt that Lisa was lying, but he couldn't prove it. That evening, he received the coroner's report. David had died from a single stab wound to the heart. The angle of the blow indicated that the killer was about the same height as the victim, or slightly shorter. That rules out a tall man, said the expert. More likely average height, possibly a woman. Thomas made a note of this. The circle of suspects was narrowing. On the third day of the investigation, Thomas decided to check the Foster family's financial records. What he found made him even more suspicious. Michael had serious credit card debt, several missed payments, maxed out cards. But the most interesting thing was recent transactions at online casinos. A gambler, Thomas muttered. Serious financial problems. He also checked the phone records. On Saturday evening, Michael called David at 6:45 p.m. The conversation lasted 2 minutes, but there was another call that caught his attention. At 7:15 p.m., someone called David from Sarah's phone. The call was dropped. Thomas checked again. Sarah claimed she had been at Lisa's since 6:30 p.m., but at 7:15 p.m., someone called David from her phone. On the fourth day, he decided to talk to the neighbors in more detail. Mrs. Evans, who lived across the hall, shared an interesting detail. On Saturday evening, I saw a woman at the front door, around 7 p.m. Can you describe her? Medium height, dark hair. She seemed nervous, looking around all the time. Have you seen her before? I think so, but I don't remember where. Thomas showed her a photo of Sarah. Is this her? Mrs. Evans looked closely. Possibly. Yes, she looks like her. Thomas felt he was close to solving the mystery. Sarah was near David's house at the time she claimed to be at her friend's house. He decided to talk to Lisa again, but this time more insistently. Lisa, I know Sarah wasn't at your house all evening. Where was she? Lisa began to cry. She asked me to lie. She said it was very important for her family. Where was she really? I don't know. She just asked me to say she was at my house if anyone asked. When did she ask you to do that? On Sunday morning. She called early. She was very upset. Thomas thanked Lisa and drove to the police station. It was time to arrest Sarah Foster. He arrived at the Foster house in the evening. Michael met him at the door, his face gray. Tom, what happened? I need to talk to Sarah. Sarah came out of the kitchen, drying her hands with a dish towel. When she saw the look on Thomas's face, she knew it was over. Sarah Foster, you are under arrest on suspicion of the murder of David Foster, Thomas said, taking out his handcuffs. Mommy! Emma cried, running down the stairs. Take the children away, Thomas said quietly to Michael. Michael hugged the children and took them upstairs. Sarah didn't resist when Thomas handcuffed her. You know I had to do it, she said. I have children. Sarah, why did you do it? He wanted to destroy my family. Tell Michael about, she stopped, about my work as an escort? Sarah looked at him in surprise. You knew? I'm a detective, Sarah. I found out. Then you understand why I did it. I understand the motive, but I can't understand how you could kill a man. He wasn't a man. He was a threat to my children. Thomas shook his head. David was a good man. He was just trying to help. Help? He was destroying my family. You and Michael were destroying your family. David just told the truth. Sarah fell silent. Thomas led her out of the house under the gaze of the neighbors. The trial took place 6 months later. Sarah pleaded not guilty, claiming she acted in the heat of the moment. But the evidence was irrefutable. A false alibi, motive, no signs of a break-in. Michael testified against his wife, recounting the events of that evening. He was forced to confess to concealing evidence. I was in shock, he said in court. I couldn't believe Sarah was capable of murder. I wanted to protect the children. The jury returned a verdict of guilty of second-degree murder. Sarah was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Michael lost his job at the bank when his gambling addiction and use of company funds came to light. The house was sold to pay off debts. Emma and Jake moved in with their grandmother, Michael's mother. The children underwent psychological therapy, but the trauma of their mother killing their uncle will stay with them forever. Paris Jones closed her cafe a year later. After everything that happened, this neighborhood isn't the same, she told her neighbors. Thomas often thought about the Foster case, a family that could have been saved if they had sought help in time. David, who tried to do the right thing but paid for it with his life. The last time he saw Michael was at the grocery store a year later. He was working as a cashier and looked older than his age. They said hello, but there was nothing to talk about. How are the kids? Thomas asked. They're doing okay. Emma is doing well in school. Jake plays football. And Sarah? I don't know, I don't visit. Michael picked up his shopping bag and headed for the exit. Tom? Yes? Thanks for finding out the truth. You're welcome. Thomas watched Michael walk away. The truth had been found. Justice had prevailed. But the price was too high. A broken family, orphaned children, a man's life lost. Sometimes the truth really does set you free, but sometimes it just destroys everything it touches.